Hi Founder fans, Jason here. Today's founder is Ezekiel Cornell, a man who was once tasked with arresting the mayor of New York City. Now Cornell came from Rhode Island from a fairly modest background. He was a mechanic, which we might think of today as a manual laborer. That being said, he impressed his community and worked his way up until he was eventually elected to the local town council. He eventually becomes moderator or chairman of that council, and after that, joins the Rhode Island Assembly. Now this happens throughout the 1760s leading up to the Revolutionary War, and once the war breaks out, Cornell was already serving in the local militia, and he is appointed as a colonel in his local militia, and he goes off after Lexington and Concord and joins the siege of Boston. He's there the whole time. He is eventually absorbed into the Continental Army, as many militia units were early in the war, and then when everyone in the Continental Army, after the British leave Boston, the Continental Army goes down to New York City. But Cornell is actually sent to Long Island. The thing is, there were a lot of loyalists living in the area, and he was there to arrest them and rout them out so that there wasn't so much enthusiasm to support the crown when the ships of the British Navy were carrying soldiers right across the shores of Long Island to Manhattan and the rest of what would become New York City. Now, Cornell kind of famously disrespects one of the churches there. He takes over St. George's Episcopal Church, which is in Hempstead. At the time, this was Queens County, but now it would be considered Nassau County. And while he's there, he forbids the churchgoers to pray for the king and parliament. And he also famously uses their sacrament table for the troops to dine at, which is always surprising because you wouldn't want to insult any religion like that, especially at the time. And you would think some of the soldiers would be upset, though there were differences between religion in Rhode Island and Long Island, and that's a different story. But there were vastly different ideas of what religion meant. Either way, Cornell is in this situation when it becomes known that there is a plot to assassinate George Washington. Thomas Hinckley was part of Washington's lifeguards, his secret service essentially, who was found to be part of this plot, and he was arrested, and eventually he confessed that there were other conspirators involved. One of these conspirators was Dave Matthews. No, not of Dave Matthews Band, of Mayor of New York City Band. The Mayor of New York City, Dave Matthews, was part of the plot to assassinate George Washington. This being found out, and the British not yet invading New York City, though their ships were approaching quickly, on June 22nd, 1776, Ezekiel Cornell carried out his orders to arrest Dave Matthews, the mayor of New York City. This is less than 2 weeks before independence is even declared. Interestingly enough, Matthews is brought to Connecticut, where he is tried for treason and sentenced to be executed, though he is put on parole, and his parole is very liberal, and eventually he is able to essentially walk out of Connecticut and return to New York City. By that point, the British had invaded New York City, and he resumes his duties as mayor throughout the Revolution until he leaves with the British. As for Cornell, he was promoted to a Brigadier General because of his efforts. He doesn't do a ton more of note, mostly participating in little skirmishes and guarding forts and such, though he does return to Long Island for the infamous Battle of Long Island that goes very poorly for the Patriots, but he plays a major role in it. After 5 years of war, Ezekiel Cornell decides he's done, and he is elected by Rhode Island to attend the Continental Congress as a delegate to the Continental Congress. And while he's there, the final state, Maryland, finally gets around to ratifying the Articles of Confederation, and officially that government becomes a government. Well, kind of. A confederation. Either way, he is there once the Continental Congress becomes the the Confederation Congress. Now, despite my trouble getting it out, we as students of history call the Articles of Confederation, that period of the 1780s, the Confederation Congress, though I should note the delegates there at the time simply called it the Continental Congress. They continued calling it that. As for Cornell, he goes back to Rhode Island and spends the rest of his days as a middling important politician and an artisan and an important member of the Rhode Island community he is from. That is the story of Ezekiel Cornell and the time the mayor of New York City was arrested by a Revolutionary Army. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, hit like, and if you're new here, subscribe for a different founder 7 days a week. I'll be back with another founder for you tomorrow.